For most of us, simply beating a long or difficult video game is rewarding enough. Others, however, don't feel satisfied unless they push a game and themselves to the craziest limits imaginable. From mining every last Minecraft block to beating Pokemon blind and deaf, let's meet some gamers who achieved the impossible. Beat with Meat. Released in 2023, the fantasy role-playing game Baldur's Gate 3 received overwhelmingly positive reviews and took home Game of the Year at that year's Game Awards. Part of the appeal is how customizable the game is. You can be a flirtatious musician, a covert assassin, a potion brewing alchemist, or a human fighter. If you're boring. YouTuber Biscuit Sticks noticed that in addition to magical weapons and trinkets, the game was filled with food. One such morsel is the humble salami. Now, while the developers intended for you to simply cook and eat this meat, they made the incredible decision of allowing you to equip it like a weapon. This led Biscuit to wonder, can you beat the game with salami? The run had one simple rule. While supportive abilities and spells could be used, all damage had to originate from floppy sausages. Biscuit began as a druid, as druids can buff simple weapons, which apparently includes meat, with the spell Shillelagh. This boosted the salami's near non-existent damage to merely incredibly low damage. As you can't actually acquire salami in the tutorial, Biscuit had to sneak past early combat encounters until he could purloin his delicious weapon from a storage room near a den of thieves. Take that, thieves! How do you like it? Even with Shillelagh, however, the salami did pathetic damage, so Biscuit multi-classed into fighter to dual-wield salami, as clearly more salami was the answer. Still, as the game progressed, even 2 salamis weren't enough. Additionally, the only ranged option Biscuit had was throwing salami, which, isn't as good as fireballs. To circumvent this vulnerability, Biscuit picked up a cloak that turned him invisible whenever he landed a kill, allowing him to quickly hit and run. Neat, right? And all he had to do to get it was cold-heartedly assassinate a beloved NPC. Talk about a blood sausage. After more experimentation, Biscuit then added in a few levels in Paladin to unlock smites. This allowed Biscuit to sacrifice useless magic to empower his meat's damage. While these salamic smites were a great boost, Biscuit still needed to play smart. Optimal strategies involved tossing salami at enemies to trip them or knock them off deadly ledges. The highlight of the run is when Biscuit disarms an avatar of the god of death with a sausage, then throws their overpowered weapon away before they can pick it up. Butterfingers! After 40 hours of tomfoolery, Biscuit successfully saved the world. He wasn't done though. He's since beaten the game whilst permanently transformed into a cat, and solely by throwing gnomes? What can't beat this game? Oh yeah, rangers. Good boys finish last. I hate to admit it, but I get mad at games a lot. I get frustrated with myself, but I know I shouldn't. After all, it's not like just anybody could pick up a controller and...
Button. There's a good boy stay.
Oh, what you're looking at is speedrunner JSR and their very good doggo Peanut Butter speedrunning the game Gyromite at AGDQ 2024. AGDQ, or Awesome Games Done Quick, is an annual event where expert streamers complete games as fast as possible in front of a live audience, raising money for charity in the process. To understand how a dog learned to game, we need to understand the game in question, Gyromite. This was an unusual NES game where players helped a bumbling professor navigate a laboratory filled with traps and enemies. What made Gyromite special was the fact it was bundled with this little cutie. Say hello to Rob, or the robotic operating buddy. Rob was a weird add-on designed to watch the screen and react when it flashed certain colors. This would make Rob push buttons on a large peripheral, impacting the game world. Runner JSR realized that while a robotic operating buddy is slow, a dog operating buddy is fast. Enter Peanut Butter. Leading up up to AGDQ 2024, JSR trained Peanut Butter tirelessly, teaching them to press buttons in response to hand gestures, audio cues, and plenty of treats. Of course, working with an excitable pooch comes with unique drawbacks. JSR claims they were on pace to beat the world record during one practice run before Peanut Butter got antsy and demanded a belly rub. When it came time for AGDQ, Peanut Butter got the full experience, meaning they died in areas they shouldn't have and experienced game glitches no one had ever seen before.
Peanut butter?
This.
What?
I'll share that my cats are Little Chicken
Button,
and Big
button,
Turkey
Button.
are there
Button.
too.
Oh. Uh-oh. Oh, no. How did the... Wait, what the heck? That's never happened before.
The kinds of problems speedrunners joke about all the time. The tensest part of the run came when Peanut Butter had to push 2 buttons at once, a difficult task for Little Paws. Despite a few setbacks, PB and JSR finished their run with a very respectable time of 26 minutes and 24 seconds. Personally, I'm more impressed JSR got a Shiba Inu to concentrate on anything that long. If you want to be as smart as Peanut Butter, why don't you use your paws to hit those like and subscribe buttons down below? All done? Great, because you need to see this next feat to believe it. The Diving Bell and the Butterfree. Sure, you may have beaten a hard video game, but have you ever solved one? A solved game is one you will always beat if you enter a known series of button inputs with the correct timing. While this might sound like magic, it's anything but. In Mario, this Goomba will always be here, this block will always be here, etc. As the game never changes, you just need to know the right buttons to push to beat it. You don't even need to look at the screen, as demonstrated by blindfolded speedrunner Crescendo here, who just used audio cues to complete this run. YouTuber MartSnack, however, wanted to do something even harder. He wanted to beat Pokemon Fire Red whilst blind and deaf. What makes Pokemon harder to crack than Mario is the fact that Pokemon is random. Monsters randomly appear in the grass, moves randomly miss or crit, and so on. This meant MartSnack needed to devise a very precise plan. He began by picking Charmander, as it knows a move with 100% accuracy, and in this run, certainty trumps power. He then mapped out every single button input necessary to navigate the game's world one tile at a time. And that was the easy part. Whenever MartSnack entered grass that could spawn Pokemon, he entered a series of inputs to escape the battle. For this to work without visual or audio confirmation, however, he had to assume every tile that could start a battle did. This meant every time he moved into a dangerous tile, he entered this series of inputs, moved forward, and did it again. To eliminate as much randomness as possible, MartSnack had to dramatically overlevel his Charmander. Enter Doug, one of the first trainers in the game. MartSnack would begin a fight with Doug, defeat his first Pokemon, then intentionally lose. This meant MartSnack would gain experience from defeating his first Pokemon, but because he lost the battle, he could rematch Doug again and again. After 40 hours of Doug grinding, MartSnack's Charmeleon was ready for anything. Thanks, Doug. After 270 hours of gameplay and an unknowable amount of scheming, MartSnack was able to beat Pokemon Fire Red's Helen Keller run, but I've saved the best for last. You see, there's a reason there have been 2 playthroughs on screen. MartSnack couldn't predict how the run's first battle would go. While the story progresses, whether you win or lose, it alters the dialogue and Charmander's level. This meant MartSnack's inputs had to account for both outcomes. That's right, MartSnack's entire code had to work in parallel universes simultaneously, and it did. My god, I can't even follow a shopping list. Endurance Mariathlon. My whole life, I've loved Mario. I remember blowing off school when Sunshine released and playing it all day. Still, even as a kid, I wouldn't want to do that every day. Well, meet Nathaniel Bandy and Simple Flips. These gamers challenged each other to an extreme Mario challenge to see which one of them could complete every single Mario side-scroller first. By their definition, that's 18 games with all the achievements of each game unlocked, so this wasn't just getting to the end of a game first. This was completing completing it multiple times under a series of different conditions. The two began with the original NES Mario Brothers and Simple Flips. Despite being an expert, game overed only 26 minutes into the challenge. Not exactly a fortuitous start. After eventually fulfilling all the achievements, they both quickly moved on to the Lost Levels, which is a semi-sequel to the original game released only in Japan. It has a reputation for being hard. So hard, in fact, that Nintendo reskinned a totally unrelated game with Mario characters and released that as Mario 2 in the West. It's notorious for its unfair design, harsh difficulty, and ridiculous enemy counts. The agony of the run was already setting in. By day 2, the pair were both on their fourth game, Super Mario World on the SNES. This game has so many secrets, Bandy created a screenshot-filled spreadsheet to help him keep track. Still, Simple Flips' experience playing a fan-made hack shot him ahead here. Unfortunately for him, the next game on their list was Mario All-Stars, a collection of the 4 original NES Mario games with updated graphics for the SNES, meaning they had to beat the games they just played again, including the Lost Levels. According to Bandy, this was where the run became more about endurance than skill. He had to force himself to take breaks as his thumb was losing circulation and the original game's repetitive music was driving him nuts. In a cruel twist of categorization, the Game Boy anthology Super Mario Deluxe was also on their list, which is another collection of the original games. By day 7, both players were onto the new Super Mario Bros. Games, while each player pulled ahead at different points. By day 12, that's right, 12, they were both on Mario Wonder, their final game. After an average of 12 hours of streaming a day, Bandy managed to cinch the victory. His completion times for each game are on screen now, but in total, Bandy was gaming for 148 hours and 15 minutes, more than half his waking hours over those 12 days. Dang, my cap goes off to these two. Mine Own World. There are a lot of ways to leave your mark on the worlds in Minecraft. Some people build towering palaces, some create dazzling machines, but one person just wanted to see it all gone. YouTuber Mythical set out on an extraordinary quest to mine every last block in the game until there was nothing left. He began this mind-boggling quest back in 2017, dubbing the operation Bedrock Massacre. This is because in Minecraft, bedrock is the unminable substance at the bottom of the world. Once you hit it, there's nothing else left. Before even a single block was mined, however, Mythical had a choice to make, attempting the task in the handy creation mode or the unforgiving survival mode. In the end, Mythical decided that creation was just a bit too helpful. It offers you so much freedom and so many tools and resources that it would diminish the accomplishment. So he went with survival. This meant on top of endless mining, Mythical would have to deal with monitoring hunger, building shelter, and of course, these. But just how many blocks are there in Minecraft anyway? Well, it depends. Different editions of the game and different settings impact the exact number. Mythical went for a classic size seed world on his PS4 edition of the game, which meant the map was 862 by 862 by 64 cubes. That's over 47.5 million blocks. However, not all those potential spaces for blocks would necessarily be filled up because no two maps are the same. Mountains, valleys, and other geographical features always vary, so that figure is just a ballpark. When Mythical got to work, he decided to start digging in the center of his world and slowly spiral out. As the years rolled by, Mythical regularly streamed his progress on Bedrock Massacre, sometimes streaming for over 7 hours a day. On September 1st, 2022, Mythical began his final stream. In the end, after going through 6,000 pickaxes, 1,000 shovels, and uploading over 2,000 hours of footage, his journey came to an end. Here it is. This is a Minecraft world completely devoid of blocks. Kinda haunting, isn't it? Hope Mythical brought a ladder to get out. Drumming Bowser. When I was a teenager, my two great passions were video games and drumming. Yeah, my parents were totally thrilled. Still, I could never pick between them. If only I'd taken a page from speedrunner CZR's book. I could have done both. This is Mario 64 being played, speedrun, on a drum kit at AGDQ 2024. How's this even possible? Well, CZR uses a program called BOEM that converts musical inputs to MIDI signals and then assigns those signals to controller buttons. With this this setup, CZR rolls, that's drum speak for beats rapidly, on a drum to move Mario in an orthogonal direction. To move diagonally, he rolls 2 drums simultaneously. Hitting one cymbal attacks while another moves the camera. A hi-hat makes Mario crouch while the all-important jump is mapped to the bass drum. As you can imagine, this setup isn't exactly intuitive. Another runner described it as intense because you need to hit the drums hard to register a response. CZR wasn't new to this kind of challenge though. He'd made a name for himself playing games like The Legend of Zelda Ocarina of Time on his drum kit. Mario 64, however, hits different, pun entirely intended. While the game isn't hard on casual playthroughs, speedruns get difficult. To save time, runners execute frame-perfect tricks and exploits like reverse long jumping up this staircase, which is supposed to go on forever and block your progression. Remember how long it took you to beat Bob-omb Battlefield as a kid? Well, as of the time of writing, the current record to beat the entire game with 16 stars is 14 minutes and 35 seconds by Suji. At AGDQ, CZR wasn't just playing the game using a physically taxing control setup, but was also doing it at world record pace. This leads to a run that isn't just incredible to watch, but is incredible to listen to. At times, it sounds like an experimental drum and bass song.
Oh, the angle's a little tough. Nice. Fantastic.
The pressure and difficulty of the run leads CZR to make some understandable mistakes, like here when he unfortunately loses a life in the fire sea when he ground pounds instead of long jumping. The fact that the difference between those two commands is a few frames of animation should highlight how brutal the run is though. In the end, CZR only lost 3 lives over the course of the run and made excellent time, finishing the game in a blistering 23 minutes and 6 seconds. To celebrate, he jammed out during the game's closing credits. Now that's a drum solo. Blockheads. Who doesn't love Tetris? When it released for the NES in 1990, it was one of the system's fastest selling games, shifting 1.5 million units in the first 6 months alone. Something that used to frustrate me though was the fact you always lose eventually. The blocks just keep getting faster until you can't keep up, right? Guess again. This young gamer is Blue Scooty, and he might just be the best Tetris player in the world. To understand his achievement though, we need a Tetris crash course. Many old games feature what are colloquially called kill screens. Essentially, these are moments in games that flat out stop you from progressing. They typically occur when you play beyond a point developers anticipated, resulting in the game collapsing under its own weight. The original Pac-Man, for example, glitches out and ceases functioning at level 256. When modders investigated the files of the original Tetris, they found that the game would similarly implode somewhere around level 155. While interesting, many thought it impossible for a human to actually get this far. The old NES controller simply isn't fast enough to manipulate the zooming blocks from level 29 onwards. Or so we thought. The community eventually discovered that by rapidly tapping the bottom of the controller rather than holding buttons down, you could theoretically play faster. As time rolled by, experienced blockheads played further and further beyond what was previously thought possible. Another nasty surprise was in store for them though. You see, Tetris gets really confused when you progress this far. One side effect is that the game no longer knows where to look in its files for block colors and starts picking some very unusual combinations. From level 138 on, it can become extremely hard to discern blocks from background, especially if you're playing on an old CRT TV. However, 2 elite players, Blue Scooty and Fractal, were each getting closer and closer to the kill screen around the same time. These two look pretty young, right? Blue Scooty is only 13 here. Well, studies have found that people's reaction times start to diminish around 24, meaning Tetris may just be a young man's game. On several occasions, the two were both streaming attempts, getting within a few levels of the record at the same time. Eventually, however, this happened.
Oh my god! Oh.
Massive respect to the young Blue Scooty. Imagine being so good at Tetris, you give the game a game over screen. Awesome. No running in the dungeon. Elden Ring is one of the biggest, most beautiful, and most brutal open world games out there. Heck, I spent half my playthrough running from my own shadow. YouTuber Gamers Weekend, however, attempted the opposite, to beat the game without running or using stamina at all. In Elden Ring, stamina is this little green bar right here. Whenever your character exerts themselves, it goes down, then slowly returns. Ironically, once you realize just how many actions require stamina, you'll start sweating. Attacking, casting spells, dodging, running, even blocking attacks consumes stamina. It's actually easier to list things that don't require stamina. Walking, talking, summoning, falling? Wait, no. Apparently falling costs stamina too. Thanks, Elden Ring. What actually saves stamina is summoning. In Elden Ring, you can summon special phantoms to fight alongside you. If this sounds easy, it isn't. Summons need to be found before they're used, and most of the best ones are in dangerous areas or gifted as rewards for defeating bosses. Additionally, while they can be helpful, they grow less useful as the game goes on and enemies get more difficult. To keep them relevant, you need to upgrade them, but doing that requires you venture into the game's nastiest dungeons for materials too. Seeing as Gamers Weekend wasn't going to be attacking, dodging, or blocking much damage, he mostly invested in hit points. More often than not, if an attack was coming for him, he wouldn't have time to avoid it. So he built a hit point Hoover, a big beefy boy who couldn't defend himself but could take a lot of damage without dying. A good deal of the run involved sneaking, summoning his bodyguards, then hiding. As effective as this strategy was, however, it couldn't last. Enemies became too aggressive and summons just couldn't keep up. Gamers Weekend resorted to trying out every weapon he could on the off chance one of them had a special skill or effect that didn't consume stamina. Eventually, he found one. The very mid-tier flail, the family heads. In addition to just an awful backstory, these heads allow you to raise them and shoot out slow, weak projectiles. But hey, for unknowable reasons, this doesn't consume stamina. Gamers Weekend slowly and carefully made his way through the game, summoning and shooting horrible ghost heads. Poison also came in clutch to whittle down the hit points of big bosses. Eventually, after dozens of hours, Gamers Weekend completed the ultimate couch potato run. What's the big deal? I live every day consuming as little stamina as possible. Fishy business. After all the violent, stressful challenges, how about we relax with some nice, calming Stardew Valley? Just kidding, this run is somehow the most brutal yet. Stardew Valley offers players the chance to farm, forage, build, fish, befriend, and even get hitched in the idyllic Pelican Town. YouTuber Argon Matrix wasn't interested in that other stuff though. He wanted to fish. Specifically, he wanted to catch every fish in the game in a single day. Now there's 67 fish in Stardew Valley, and a typical in-game day lasts about 14 minutes, meaning Argon Matrix needed to catch a fish every 12.5 seconds. But wait, it gets worse, as Stardew Valley is a cozy game designed to be played in chunks over a long period of time. Many of those fish can only be caught in specific seasons. Luckily, Argon Matrix found a few workarounds. Firstly, while the day may only be 14 minutes long, parts of the fishing minigame pause time, granting a little breathing room. Secondly, special bait can remove seasonal restrictions on fish. As Argon Matrix theorized, however, this is a double-edged sword. While it makes the challenge possible, it also means every time you fish, the game is pulling from a larger pool of fish you can hook. Imagine buying 1,000 lottery tickets instead of 1 to improve your odds, only to find out instead of just selecting numbers between 0 and 9, the lottery used 67 different fish. To prepare, Argon Matrix crafted as much bait as possible, along with tackles that reduce the time between fish bites, but also attract lower quality fish because Stardew Valley is apparently unforgiving. They also cleared any debris, logs, and stones along the route they'd be sprinting. Argon Matrix saved the game and began his quest. After 2 foiled attempts, he was able to catch 57 fish on attempt 3. Not bad. How hard could this challenge be? Well, 18 hours later, 57 was still their best result. There just wasn't enough time. And after 107 attempts, Argon Matrix changed strategy. They decided to fish during a festival day, as it offered another special location to catch some rare fish. By attempt 140, this approach netted Argon Matrix an agonizing 64 out of 67 fish. Still, they were close. It couldn't take too much longer, right? Wrong. On attempt 536, Argon Matrix caught 66 fish before their character collapsed from exhaustion. In the real world, Argon Matrix was about to follow suit, so set himself a limit of 600 attempts. Finally, after 200 hours of fishing on attempt 583, Argon needed 1 more fish. It had an 11% chance of spawning, and he had less than a minute left on the clock.
That's it! Oh my god, I'm done!
And with that, after over 300 grueling hours, Argon Matrix could finally take down their Gone Fishing sign. Skyrim side. Skyrim, the beautiful, buggy, broken game we just keep coming back to. What's not to love? The open world, the colorful cast, the bugs. One YouTuber known as Dumpy Kong, however, wasn't charmed by the game's colorful cast. In fact, he wanted to see if you could kill every single NPC in the game, leaving the world completely empty. As it turns out, you can't. The game won't let you. However, as with every Bethesda game, modders stepped in to make the experience better. With the use of a mod, Dumpy was able to slay basically every living creature in the game, regardless of whether it wanted him to or not. Before going on a killing spree, however, Dumpy first had to make a spreadsheet. This spreadsheet included every NPC in the game along with their location, like a massive hit list. The second phase of this quest was, funnily enough, to be a really good guy. Dumpy had to go through the game helping everyone and completing major quests, as many NPCs can't be met otherwise. I think this makes his character's fall from grace all the more tragic though. So Dumpy goes through all the main quests, saves the world, becomes the Archmage, becomes the Listener, becomes a werewolf. Overall, has an eventful couple of days. After all that is done though, he begins the slaughter. The companions who helped him save the world, dead. The Thieves Guild, dead. The mages who just appointed him their leader, totally dead. Maybe you should have reviewed his resume more thoroughly, guys. After that, Dumpy worked his way through the major cities like the world's deadliest tourist. Innkeepers, monks, civilians, even orphans fell to Dumpy's blade. Look, no one said this challenge was going to be pretty. After that, Dumpy went on what he called the cleanup phase of the challenge, which was removing any stragglers. NPCs you meet randomly are NPCs that were particularly well guarded or hard to find. It was at this point Dumpy admitted the run was kinda depressing. Who could have guessed? Dumpy saved the wizened graybeards and Parthenax for the end of the run, feeling it appropriate. With only one final target, Dumpy leapt to his fate. In the end, he would claim over 1,800 heads, with his own being his last. A bleak conclusion to a sobering run. An exercise that ultimately proved the pursuit of violence for its own sake to yield nothing but a cold, hollow, and joyless victory. Anyway, thanks for watching my super fun video, guys. Those were some pretty crazy achievements though, huh? I still can't believe the Pokemon one. But which one was your favorite? Did I miss any good ones? Let me know about them down in the comments, and thanks for watching.